A cry in the trash. A Florida sun beat down on Myers' neck, turning the familiar walk home from school into a slow, sweaty slog. The asphalt shimmered with heat, and even the usually boisterous cicadas seemed to have retreated into the shade. She tugged at the collar of her school uniform, wishing she'd remembered to bring her water bottle. Rounding the corner onto her street, a faint, almost imperceptible sound caught her ear. It was high-pitched and weak, like a kitten mewling, but somehow different. Meyer paused, tilting her head. The sound seemed to be coming from the overflowing trash bin at the end of old Mrs. Henderson's driveway. Hesitantly, she approached the bin. The stench of rotting food and discarded diapers assaulted her nostrils. There it was again, a tiny, whimpering sound, definitely coming from inside one of the black plastic bags. A knot of apprehension tightened in Meyer's stomach. What if it was a rat? Or worse? Taking a deep breath, she reached for the closest bag, its plastic slick with moisture. As she gingerly pulled it open, the whimpering intensified. Her heart pounded. Inside, nestled amongst coffee grounds and orange peels, was a creature so small and fragile it almost defied belief. It was a bobcat cub. Tiny, barely bigger than her two hands cupped together, with huge, frightened eyes and tufted ears that twitched nervously. Its fur was a mottled brown and black, and its miniature tail was barely a stub. It shivered despite the sweltering heat, its whimpers small cries of distress. Meyer gasped, her initial fear giving way to a surge of protectiveness. How could anyone throw away something so helpless? Carefully, she reached out a hand, palm up, letting the cub sniff her fingers. It flinched, then tentatively licked her skin with a raspy tongue. "Hey there, little one," as she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The cub continued to whimper, but it didn't pull away. It seemed exhausted, its small body trembling with hunger and fear. Meyer knew she couldn't leave it there. Carefully, she scooped the cub into her arms, supporting its tiny body. It felt incredibly light, almost weightless. Its claws, though small, pricked her skin through her uniform. As she lifted it from the bag, it let out a protesting yell. "Shush," as she soothed, cradling it close. "It's all right. I'm going to take you somewhere safe." Walking quickly now, desperate to get the cub out of the oppressive heat, she hurried toward home. She knew she'd have to explain this to Ricardo, and to her parents. But looking down at the small, frightened creature in her arms, she knew she couldn't have done anything else. This tiny bobcat, abandoned in the trash, needed her. She would name him Rusty. And she wouldn't let him down. Rusty's secret. "He needs a name," Meyer whispered, stroking the bobcat cub's reddish-brown fur. "Rusty. That's it. You look like a Rusty." The cub flinched at her touch, but didn't pull away. His amber eyes, wide and unfocused, stared up at her. He was so small, so fragile. Ricardo, perched on the edge of the dumpster, looked around nervously. "Meyer, we need to get him out of here. Your parents will be home soon." Meyer nodded, her mind already racing. She carefully scooped Rusty into her arms, cradling him against her chest. His tiny body trembled against her. "I'll hide him in my room." The back door creaked shut behind them. Meyer tiptoed through the silent house, Ricardo trailing behind. Her heart hammered against her ribs with each step. She reached her room, a sanctuary of posters and books, and gently placed Rusty on her bed. He immediately tried to burrow under her duvet, shivering. Meyer smoothed the blanket around him, trying to offer some warmth. "It's okay, Rusty. You're safe now." Ricardo rummaged through her mini-fridge. Got any milk? Or maybe some chicken? Maya grabbed a carton of milk and poured some into a small bowl. Rusty sniffed at it cautiously, then turned away. She tried offering him tiny pieces of shredded chicken, but he refused to open his mouth. Frustration began to gnaw at her. Maybe he wants tuna? Ricardo suggested, producing a can from the pantry. The smell of tuna filled the room, but Rusty remained stubbornly uninterested. He just huddled deeper into the duvet, his little body shaking. Panic started to set in. He hadn't eaten anything since they found him. Maya dipped her finger in the milk and gently touched it to his lips. He licked it tentatively, but didn't try to drink more. His eyes, clouded with weakness, flickered shut for a moment. "He's not eating," Amaya said, her voice laced with worry. "He's too weak." She gently stroked his head, feeling the fine fur beneath her fingers. He was so small, so vulnerable. She had to do something. She couldn't let him die. Her gaze fell on the window, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the room. She knew she was running out of time. Grandpa's wisdom. Ricardo hummed a tuneless melody as he pruned the bougainvillea, the scent of blossoms thick in the afternoon air. Maya sat on the porch steps, shoulders slumped, tracing patterns in the cracked concrete with her finger. He snipped a particularly vibrant crimson bloom, but his eyes kept straying to his granddaughter. Her usual spark was dimmed, replaced by a worry that seemed to weigh her down. "Those steps look awfully interesting, Major," he said, his voice gentle as the breeze rustling through the palm trees. "Planning to memorize every crack?" Maya didn't look up. "Just thinking, Grandpa." He knelt beside her, his weathered hands, calloused from years of tending to animals, resting on his knees. "Thinking hard, it seems. Hard enough to wrinkle your pretty forehead. What troubles you, Maya?" She hesitated, chewing on her lip. The secret felt like a hot coal in her pocket, burning her with guilt and fear. It's nothing, really." Ricardo chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. "Nothing makes a person sit like a wilting sunflower. Come now, you know you can tell your old abuelo anything." Taking a deep breath, Maya blurted it out. "I found an animal. A hurt animal. And I brought him home." Ricardo's eyebrows rose, but he remained silent, patiently waiting for her to continue. His in my room. And he needs help." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's a bobcat cub, Grandpa. A tiny one. Someone threw him away." A long moment of silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the chirping of crickets. Maya braced herself for anger, for disappointment. Instead, Ricardo sighed, a sound laced with a strange kind of sorrow. "A bobcat, eh? Thrown away, you say?" He reached out and gently touched her hand. "Show me, Major. I won't be angry. You know I would never be angry with you for caring. But we need to see what we can do to help him. And we need to figure out how to help without getting ourselves into trouble." Hope flickered in Maya's chest, a tiny ember glowing in the darkness. "Really? You'll help?" Ricardo smiled, a network of wrinkles crinkling around his eyes. "Of course, I will. I'm a veterinarian, remember? Though it's been a few years since I've treated anything wilder than a grumpy chihuahua." He winked. "Let's go see this little gato. Nursing Rusty back to health." Ricardo's calloused fingers gently probed Rusty's ribs. The cub whimpered, a pathetic, high-pitched sound that tightened Myra's stomach. Ricardo sighed, his brow furrowed. He's severely dehydrated and malnourished. Feel his spine, Myra. Too prominent. She ran a tentative hand along Rusty's back. She could feel each vertebra, sharp and distinct beneath his thin fur. Poor thing. What do we do? First, hydration. Then, we need to get some nutrients into him. Slowly. Ricardo moved with practiced efficiency, gathering supplies from his battered vet bag. He mixed a concoction of electrolytes and a milk replacer designed for kittens, the closest he had to a Bobcat formula. The mixture smelled faintly sweet and medicinal. Here, he said, filling a small dropper. Hold him steady, but gently. I'll dribble this into his mouth. Just a little at a time. He needs to learn to swallow again. Rusty resisted at first, turning his head away from the dropper. But Ricardo was patient, coaxing him with soft words and gentle strokes. Slowly, Rusty began to accept the liquid, his tongue tentatively lapping at the end of the dropper. Hours blurred into a cycle of small feedings, warm blankets, and anxious observation. Myra took a shift, Ricardo took a shift, each of them constantly monitoring Rusty's breathing, his temperature, his tiny bowel movements. Maya found herself whispering to Rusty, telling him stories about the forest, about strong bobcats hunting deer, about the warm sun on his fur. She wasn't sure if he understood, but it made her feel like she was doing something, anything, to help. By the next morning, a glimmer of hope emerged. Rusty was still weak, but he was no longer listless. He lifted his head when Myra approached, his amber eyes, though still clouded with fear, held a spark of curiosity. He even managed a weak purr when she stroked his head. Ricardo examined him again, a rare smile gracing his lips. He's responding. It's a long road, but he's fighting. He handed Myra the dropper. Your turn, nurse. Air. A growing bond. The small, raspy sound started subtly, like a dry leaf skittering across pavement. Myra stilled her hand, holding her breath. It came again, a low rumble that vibrated through her fingertips as she stroked Rusty's patchy fur. He was purring. Ricardo, perched on the edge of the sofa, grinned. Hear that, Myra? He likes you. Myra felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just that he was tolerating them, he was actually enjoying their touch. She continued stroking him, careful of the healing scratches. Rusty shifted, nudging his head against her palm. A few days ago, such contact would have been met with hisses and frantic struggles. Now, he was relaxed, almost content. He even blinked slowly, his amber eyes half closed. Encouraged, Ricardo tentatively reached out a finger. Rusty, instead of recoiling, batted at it playfully with a paw, claws retracted. A tiny, ineffectual swipe, but a swipe nonetheless. Myra laughed, a light, joyful sound. He's playing. Ricardo chuckled. He's getting his strength back. We might have a little terror on our hands soon. I don't mind, Myra said softly, watching Rusty. He was kneading her blanket now, tiny paws pushing and pulling at the soft fleece. He looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she was just getting used to him. That night, Myra lay in bed, the image of Rusty's contented face burned into her mind. She imagined him fully recovered, sleek and strong. She pictured building him a special den in the backyard, a safe haven filled with soft straw and hidden corners. She could line it with his favorite blankets. A pang of longing hit her. She knew, logically, that she couldn't keep him forever. He belonged in the wild. but the thought of letting him go was a sharp, unwelcome ache. She tossed and turned, the weight of her conflicting desires heavy on her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she could convince her parents. She'd do anything to keep him safe, to watch him grow, to love him. The thought bloomed in her heart, fragile but persistent. Maybe Rusty could be hers. The wild's call. The sight of Rusty nestled against Meyer, a tiny body seeking solace in her warmth, twisted something inside Ricardo. The young animal had placed complete faith in her, rumbling with contentment as she stroked the downy coat. But Rusty wasn't a house cat. Ricardo lowered himself onto the porch swing beside them, the setting sun casting elongated silhouettes across the lawn. "Sweetheart," he began softly, "we need to discuss Rusty." Lifting her gaze, Meyer's eyes reflected pure adoration. "He's thriving, Ricardo. Eating well, playing, almost like he belongs here." Ricardo exhaled, raking his fingers through his thinning hair. "That's precisely the problem, May. He doesn't belong here. He's inherently wild." Her smile wavered. "But he needs us. He was injured, abandoned, and we helped him recover, which was absolutely the right thing. But keeping him is another matter entirely, and ultimately unfair. He needs to hone his hunting instincts, to learn survival in the wild. He needs the company of his own kind." Ricardo's tone remained gentle but firm. Meyer's lip quivered. She buried her face in Rusty's thick coat, her shoulders beginning to tremble. Sensing her distress, the cub nudged her cheek with his head. "I don't want him to leave," as she mumbled, her voice thick with emotion. "I love him so much." Ricardo encircled her with his arm, drawing her close. "I know you do, honey. And he adores you too. But love sometimes demands the hardest choices. Think about him growing up here, a shadow of his true self, never fully embracing his wildness. It wouldn't fulfill him." A solitary tear escaped and landed on Rusty's fur. She gazed up at Ricardo, her eyes brimming with a mixture of sorrow and burgeoning understanding. "So, what can we do?" "There's a wildlife rehabilitation center about an hour away. They specialize in nurturing orphaned animals and preparing them for release. They have experienced handlers who can teach Rusty the essential skills he'll need." The image of Rusty alone in the vast wilderness, vulnerable and alone, sparked a wave of anxiety within Meyer. Yet she knew Ricardo spoke the truth. It was the only viable path. She nodded slowly, her fingers clutching Rusty's fur. "Okay," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Okay, we'll take him to the center." The word center offered a sliver of solace, a whisper of security even as she braced herself for the sharp sting of Fidwell. The air hummed with unspoken grief and the sweet, heady fragrance of honeysuckle drifting from the nearby vines. Sanctuary bound. The hum of the engine vibrated through the cardboard carrier holding Rusty. Meyer glanced at him in the rearview mirror. His emerald eyes, usually bright with mischief, were wide with a fear she understood all too well. He pressed himself against the side of the carrier closest to her, a tiny, furry shadow. "Almost there, little guy," Ricardo said, his voice gentle. He reached over and stroked Meyer's knee. "It's for the best, you know." The sanctuary was a sprawling expanse of fenced enclosures and wooded aeries just outside of town. As they pulled up to the main building, a woman with kind eyes and a practical braid emerged. "Meyer? Ricardo? I'm Sarah." She gestured to a smaller enclosure near the back. "This is where Rusty will be spending his first few weeks. It's adjacent to where our other Bobcat cubs are." As Meyer lifted the carrier, Rusty whimpered, digging his claws into the cardboard. He refused to come out, even when Meyer coaxed him with gentle words. Sarah knelt down, her voice calm. "He's scared." "Completely normal. Here, let me show you something." Sarah unlocked a gate leading to the adjacent enclosure. Two slightly larger bobcat cubs, their coats a mottled brown and gold, were playfully batting at a feathered toy suspended from a branch. Rusty's ears perked up. He crept to the edge of his carrier, his gaze fixed on the other cubs. "They were orphaned too," as Sarah explained. "We're teaching them to hunt, to survive. We'll introduce Rusty to them slowly, let him get comfortable. He'll learn from them." Sarah then led Meyer and Ricardo to a larger, more natural enclosure. "This is where they'll eventually graduate to," she said. "We simulate real-world scenarios. We teach them to track prey, to build dens, to avoid dangers. It's all about giving them the skills they need to thrive when they're released." Meyer watched as another sanctuary worker tossed a dead rabbit into the enclosure. One of the older cubs, a sleek female with piercing yellow eyes, instantly went into hunting mode. She stalked the rabbit, her body low to the ground, before pouncing with surprising speed and accuracy. "We'll start Rusty with simpler things, of course," as Sarah said, noticing Meyer's concern. "But he'll get there. He has the instincts. We just need to nurture them." Back at Rusty's enclosure, Maya finally managed to coax him out of the carrier. He clung to her leg, trembling. She knelt down and stroked his soft fur, whispering promises of safety and happiness. It was time to let go. She stood up, a lump forming in her throat. "He'll be okay, Meyer," Ricardo said, putting an arm around her. Maya took one last look at Rusty before turning and walking away, trusting that the sanctuary would give him the second chance he deserved. Saying goodbye. The transport crate sat open, a dark rectangle against the vibrant green of the forest floor. Sunlight dappled through the canopy, painting shifting patterns on the crate's mesh door. Rusty remained huddled at the back, a trembling ball of fur. The scent of pine and damp earth, so different from the familiar smells of Meyer's kitchen, filled his nostrils. It was overwhelming, terrifying. "Come on, little guy," Ricardo said softly, crouching low. He held out a gloved hand, not reaching for Rusty, but offering a silent invitation. "It's time to go home." Meyer stood beside Ricardo, her heart aching. She knew this was the right thing, the only thing, but letting go was so much harder than she'd anticipated. She remembered finding him, a shivering, flea-ridden scrap abandoned in that dumpster. Now, he was sleek and strong, a miniature predator ready to claim his birthright. Rusty didn't move. He fixed his amber eyes on Meyer, a silent plea in their depths. Had she betrayed him? Had all the cuddles and tuna been a lie? She swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Go on, Rusty. Be free." The silence stretched, punctuated only by the chirping of unseen insects. Ricardo sighed and took a step back, giving Rusty more space. "He needs to decide on his own," he whispered to Meyer. Finally, Rusty unfolded himself. He crept to the edge of the crate, his claws clicking softly on the metal. He poked his nose out, sniffing the air cautiously. The forest floor, covered in fallen leaves and twigs, looked vast and unknown. He hesitated. Then, he turned his head and looked back at them, a long, searching look. Meyer felt a lump form in her throat. He seemed to be memorizing their faces, etching them into his memory. And then, he chirped. It was a soft, questioning sound, barely audible above the rustling leaves, but it was enough to shatter the last of Meyer's composure. Tears welled in her eyes. With a final, lingering glance, Rusty stepped out of the crate. He paused for a heartbeat, his paws sinking slightly into the soft earth. Then, with a burst of unexpected speed, he darted into the undergrowth. He moved like a shadow, a fleeting glimpse of tawny fur and black-tipped tail before he vanished completely. Meyer held her breath, straining to hear any sound, any sign of him. But the forest remained silent, indifferent. He was gone. Ricardo put his arm around Meyer, pulling her close. "He'll be okay," he said, his voice gentle. "He's where he belongs." Meyer nodded, but the tears streamed down her face unchecked. The forest had swallowed him whole, and with him, a piece of her heart. A second chance. Years blurred, each one etching itself onto Meyer's face in the form of laugh lines and the faintest silver threads woven into her dark braid. The sting of disinfectant had long replaced the scent of her mother's rosewater perfume, and the chaotic symphony of textbooks and teenage angst had yielded to the quieter rhythm of responsibility and purpose. She wasn't the same girl who'd nervously clutched a cardboard box containing a shivering ball of fur. Now, the sanctuary was her haven. Every Saturday, rain or shine, Meyer arrived before dawn, the crisp morning air biting at her cheeks. She mucked out enclosures, restocked food supplies, and assisted the vet tech with routine checkups, her hands surprisingly steady as she held a hawk's talons or coaxed a reluctant opossum out of its carrier. But beneath the practical tasks, a persistent hope simmered. She knew, logically, that the chances were infinitesimally small. The sanctuary rehabilitated hundreds of animals each year, releasing them back into the vast wilderness. Yet, every time a bobcat was brought in for assessment, every time she caught a glimpse of reddish fur through the trees surrounding the enclosure, her heart would skip a beat. "Anything interesting today, Meyer?" Dr. Ramirez asked, his voice raspy from years of early mornings and late nights. He was hunched over a clipboard, his brow furrowed as he reviewed a report. Meyer shook her head, trying to sound casual. "Just routine stuff. We got a young raccoon with a snare injury. Looks like he'll make a full recovery." She hesitated, then added, "Any bobcats?" Dr. Ramirez glanced up, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "Not today, Meyer. But you know, even if he did come back, you probably wouldn't recognize him. They change so much when they're fully grown, especially after a few years in the wild." Meyer knew he was right. The tiny, helpless cub she'd rescued was a world away from the sleek, powerful predator he had become. Still, she clung to the image she carried in her mind, the distinctive dark markings around his eyes, the way he used to burrow into her lap for warmth. She continued her rounds, the weight of the empty bobcat question settling on her shoulders. As she cleaned the owl enclosure, she felt a sudden jolt. Not of recognition, but of understanding. It wasn't about seeing him again. It was about knowing that she had played a part in his survival, that she had given him a second chance at life. The wild called to him. He belonged out there in nature. And that was enough.